This is the Blue Water Outlook weekly weather briefing for April 22nd, 2018. Well, probably the biggest weather story this week is going to be a system that's going to sort of skirt across the southeast U.S. early this week, intensify a bit, bring some winds and soaking rain to parts of the southeast U.S. and mid-Atlantic states. Otherwise, it's going to be a fairly quiet week compared to at least the past few weeks. Now, last week what we had very soaking rain over parts of the eastern U.S. You can see that area in yellow, 2 inches or more of rain. We also had this band here, and you might say, hey, John, that doesn't look all that impressive, but that came in the form of snow. And, I've been talking about this digging trough over the central U.S. for months now. Been our predominant winter pattern, and it's really lingered into spring, keeping a lot of winter impacts, including a very late winter season snow. But as of this morning, I also have been saying that this snow that falls this time of year melts very quickly. Even if we are in a cold pattern, it melts fairly quickly, and there's not a whole lot there, and that won't be around all that much. Now, the departure from normal over the last 7 days was well below normal over the north central U.S. and actually most of the nation below normal, with that cyclonic flow aloft with the jet stream. That's resulted in somewhat of a managed flow or melting of that snow. What I mean by that, I've mentioned this several times, is at nighttime it gets cold enough that it slows that down. And the other good thing is we didn't have any rain on top of that snow. Now remember, I had a couple scenarios. The worst case would be if it melted really quick. We had some warm air with rain on top of that. So we really did have probably the best scenario, considering that we had snow on the ground, very late season snow. But the cold air is having an impact on soil temperatures. We're starting to get some field work in now in preparation for spring planting. That 50-degree line is very important, and you can see it really hasn't made it up into the Midwest yet, so not much, if any, spring planting yet. But sort of a teaser for today's briefing, does look like some fairly big changes are in store as we get into early May. Now, we have some very sizable drought impacts over parts of Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and that area did receive maybe about a half inch of rain in there. So that was, you might say, well, that is not much at all. And really, when you need 3 to 6 inches of rain to sort of eliminate all those drought impacts, it's not all that much. But still, it was the most rain that has occurred in many, many months in that area. So at least it's a start. And when we break a drought, there's a couple ways to do it. You can get an extreme event that just sort of soaks the area, and such as an inland moving tropical system. But another way to do that is just gradually get that soil wetter and wetter and finally sort of break out of it. Problem is, with the soils as dry as they are, that half inch is totally soaked in, and we're still vulnerable towards, as we get into the hot months, lack of daily convection because the soils are just so dry. So we look at stream flow across the nation. What we see here is we do see quite a bit of blue in this area here, and that's representing the melting snow that has affected tributaries in those areas. Now, you might say, okay, what about the Mississippi? Well, probably impacts some points right here in the local area, but as it moves downstream, there was not much rain and no snow further downstream, so that's going to attenuate, and it's really not going to have all that much impact other than tributaries and maybe a few rises on the very far upper reaches of the Mississippi. Okay, so when we get into the forecast, I mentioned some changes, and you probably won't notice them the first 3 or 4 or 5 days of the forecast period here, because we still have that digging trough or the jet stream further south than it should be. And because of that, temperatures will be cooler than average over large areas that have been very cold. Now, remember a couple weeks ago, last week, and many weeks before that, we had that really, really cold air in this area, 10 to 20 degrees below normal. We don't see that, so we are beginning to break down this pattern. This week we're going to have this system, as I mentioned, sort of move up across the southeast U.S. early this week, Monday, and produce some very heavy rain. And that's pretty much the precipitation story this week. maybe 1 to 3 inches of rain. And when we see this area right here lined like this, that's an enhancement of precipitation over higher elevations of the southern Appalachians. Also, we might get a little bit more rain here in Oklahoma and Texas. That's an area that really needs it, so that'd be a very beneficial rain, even though it might only be a ½ inch or so. I mentioned that we do have quite a bit of flooding. Here's the forecast, and you can see all the points in very high flows, which is yellow, minor flooding orange, or even some moderate flooding where that snow's melting that was very heavy in red. We also have some lingering flood flows moving down parts of the lower Ohio and lower Mississippi. And with the rain moving into the southeast U.S., also some rises in the southeast U.S. Now we begin to see the more significant changes as we get into the 6 to 10 day period. The jet stream starts to push up to the north here. The dipping of the jet stream's been around, seems like forever, shifts off to the east, and that starts to push that air, cold air, to the east and replace it with warm air. So it's been a really long time since North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, Montana, surrounding states have seen above normal temperatures, and this is This is the first time in a long, long time that this has occurred. Okay, now we get into, this is actually the first week in May, and what we begin to see here is that trough has broke down, ridge is starting to build, and look at this. We have not seen this type of pattern. I don't even remember how long it's been since we've seen this type of pattern. Above normal temperatures over large parts of the area. And this is where I really do think we're going to see things pop. We're going to see the vegetation really start to green up and accelerate, and we're going to see soil temperatures really start to warm up over ag areas. So precipitation departures week 1. I said the southeast U.S. and mid-Atlantic would be the area to keep an eye on. And here's week 2. Most of this area, this would be beneficial rain for week 2, and pretty quiet in the southeast U.S. As far as hazards go, excessive rainfall indicates where the rainfall amount exceeds a threshold that might produce a more enhanced runoff or flooding. You can see that there is that chance in a few spots over the southeast U.S. this week. But overall, this is a 3 to 7 day hazard outlook, much quieter than we've seen in quite some time. So other than that soaking rain in the southeast mid-Atlantic region and middle of the U.S. snowmelt flooding, looks like less wildfire activity and overall less weather impacts this week than we've had in a few, and pretty quiet also as far as severe weather goes. That's this week's briefing. Hope that helps you in your planning. Have a great week.